Good evening, everyone. My name is Ms. Papati. I am the research analyst here at the Center for International and Regional Studies. On behalf of CIRS, I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monographic discussion, which is based on this wonderful publication that just came out and titled Remittances as Belonging, Global Migration, Transnationalism, and the Quest for Home, written by Professor Hasan Mahmud, who is right in the audience, and I'll be welcoming him to the stage in a few minutes. Before we get into the event, I would like to remind everyone of the key housekeeping points. I will request everyone to either turn off their phones or put them on silent so that we do not disturb the conversation. We expect people to continue arriving so they could just take space for the urinals and sleep over in the front. We are recording tonight's conversations. If you would like to revisit the conversation or send the recording to a colleague or a friend, please visit our website in a couple of days or our YouTube channel where you'll find the full recording. If you haven't already, please sign up to our mailing list, which you can either give us your contact details or write them down, and we'll ensure that you are on this list and are aware of our upcoming events. After the conversation between our panelists, there will be time for audience Q&A. So if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and someone's committee on mic. After the event, there is a reception, so please join us for that. Tonight's conversation or the format of the event is a bit different from our previous dialogue series. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation between Professor Mahmud, Amanda Garrett, and Zahra Babar, which will explore the moral, social, and emotional dimensions of remittances and what they reveal about belonging, home, and migration, which are the core themes in this. Other themes that this book explore are identity, transnationalism, global migration, temporary versus permanent pockets of migration, flows of remittances, and how they're affected and how they vary over time. Tonight's event is being hosted under our umbrella research project that will be looking at migration studies from the global south. We will be launching this project very soon, so please visit our website for more details, which will be coming before, I think, the end of this week, inshallah. So this particular book project is based on Hasan Mahmud's ethnographic fieldwork over the course of 3.5 years, which she carried out among Bangladeshi male migrants based in Tokyo and Los Angeles. And this book comes across asking some very key and pertinent questions. Questions such as, what are remittances? How do migrants sense up to find them? Why migrants sell remittances? And who sets remittances to whom? This book, or the author, encourages us to look beyond economic considerations and recognize the deep emotional and social ties that remittances sustain. In that sense, the main underlying argument that remittances are a powerful expression of migrants' enduring social and emotional ties to their homeland. Through compelling vignettes and stories, which are my favorite part, and as you can see, I've marked my favorite passages throughout the book, Mahmud reveals how remittances represents a common struggle to create and maintain a sense of home across international borders. In this sense, remittances become an act of care, obligation, and identity that connects migrants. Next discussion will examine these 4 themes and look at how these transnational practices complicate the conventional ideas of integration, citizenship, and belonging, and how structural conditions from labor regime to social recognition shape migrants' lived experiences and public experiences. I think I've spoken a lot, and you're not here to listen to me. So with that, I would like to welcome our panelists to the stage, Hasan Mahmud, Amanda Garrett, and Zahra Babar. Please join. For the brief introduction, I will start with Hasan, who is right in the center of the study. Hasan Mahmud is an assistant professor in residence at Rutgers University. His teaching and research interests include sociological theories, localization, international migration and development, identity politics, and global ethnography. Amanda Garrett, he is to the far left of me, is an assistant professor of comparative and international politics here at Rutgers University Press. Her research focuses on migration and ethnic diversity in advantaged economies, including immigration and integration, ethnic violence, minority political cooperation, and Islam in Western societies. Last but not the least, Zahra Babar is Executive Director at CIRS here at Georgetown. Previously, she has served with the International Labour Organization and the United Nations Development Programme. Her research looks at rural development, migration and legal policies, and citizenship in the Persian Gulf. With that, I'll turn it over to Ananda. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to again thank our guests for being here. Really, it's such an honor to have this conversation. I have to say that I enjoy being spoke tremendously. I also was very personally invested in these stories. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I grew up not too far from the neighbor has reconducted his fieldwork net, and I also have very close ties to Bangladesh. So I felt like I was reading, the story of my friends sort of unfold before me. So I read with a lot of personal interest. But also as an academic, a scholar of migrations, this book was incredibly interesting to me because it really does challenge quite a lot of the sort of preconceived notions we have about migration and the things we take for granted about this process in a really, really interesting and compelling way. So I think they came away with really a lot of questions. Well, one thing actually that struck me as probably the most interesting and compelling part of the story is that you've got these migrants who are going to, in very different contexts, their trajectories of belonging are very different. Their halves of sending remittances are also very different. And yet at the end of the day, at the end of the book, they all express that Bangladesh is still their home. They're always pulled back to Bangladesh. And for Japan, this made sense to me. I understood that going to a regime is very exclusionary, where the opportunities for sort of legal recognition are relatively limited. You can't rig your families. It's hard to get citizenship. Even for those maybe who do manage to set down roots, the level of socio-cultural exclusion is very high. And so it made a lot of sense that then Bangladesh would be their anchor for home. But I think the Los Angeles story struck me as the real interesting part of the equation, because here you have the opposite context where you can get citizenship, you can bring your family, you can settle down roots, you can feel at home in the United States, and yet at the end of the day, these migrants still said that they felt like Bangladesh was their home. And so I felt like I come away with one major question, which was, why? Why do you think it was that even though you had these very disparate receiving contexts, very disparate integration regimes, Bangladesh is always that anchor point for these migrants? And is there any sort of single unifying way you could think about what is pulling people back off Bangladesh?
Thank you so much for sharing your impression of my book. I mean, it's always pleasing, and I'm actually honored that you read my book and you liked it. So I'm like feeling lucky because like in academia, whenever you get something published, you have to go through review process. Other academics review your book, and it's always difficult to get through. So, because they are very used to be very critical, they're very difficult to convince with whatever you have to offer as an analysis and argument, right? So, in that context, the kind of words you have just shared with us about my book, I mean, it makes me feel like, so happy. Thank you so much. So, the question you ask is really a great one. I was also surprised when I first encountered some of the migrants and learned about their frustration. Their frustration of not being able to see or experience what they expected at the beginning of their migration to America. Because, like in Bangladesh or like many other countries, America is the dream country. The American dream is very powerful and hardly present, and it has like such a strong power to draw attention or attract like people across the board from most of the countries abroad, right? So these are the people after living 10 years or 15 years, achieving their American dream, for example, owning their house in a suburb, having for themselves upper middle class career, be it in business for academia or professional something, sending kids to reputed universities who would eventually enter into upper middle class or upper class in America, right? And achieving everything, and at the end of the day, sitting with me in one of the lazy, afternoon or evening, that opened up. Usually, they wouldn't engage in this kind of conversation in public or in large group. But when I demonstrated my genuine interest to know about their actual experience and impression of settling in America, a number of them started sharing their stories in a way that I find a pattern that they are not happy. They don't feel content. They don't feel complete. So that actually encouraged me to dig deeper, to ask more questions, to meet people in their lifestyle, not in somewhere else. So I started living in what is now officially recognized as Little Bangladesh. We rented a house. My wife and I rented a little apartment over there, and we would regularly meet people in their daily life. That's how we were able to develop some kind of like friendship. I mean, still some of them are really close friends to me and us. And they started sharing their experience. So from there, I started thinking more and more about how to understand, how to make sense of something that is so strange at the face value, right? Then I sat back. Side by side, I was engaging with them in the field, but I was also taking advanced level courses like PhD courses at UCL Sociology department with some of the, I'm lucky that I had the opportunity to, privilege to attend some of the classes with some of the leading migration scholars like Rosa Waldinger. I took migration sequences, Rosa Waldinger. I took race and ethnicity with Rosa Bubakar. And Mijo. So side by side, I was engaging with literature, academic literature about migrants, why migrants move across borders, why, how they do what they, do, and what happens to them theoretically. On the other hand, I was engaging and observing in real life situations. So that was a wonderful opportunity for me to explore some of the questions that Ms. shared here. Right. One of the basic concept, basic aspect in every individual's life, perhaps, is to live a better life compared to what we already have been living in and through. Right. Migration can also be seen as a strategic move to live a better life, be it be it economically motivated, politically motivated, socially culturally motivated. Ultimate target may be to lead a better life. Where do we live? We live essentially in a whole, right? So the idea of better life, if we want to contextualize it, it has to be situated in a home. So what is home? It is location. It has to be situated somewhere, right? It's a house, it's a structure. But it's not an empty structure. It is a structure filled with most intimate individuals in our life. Our parents, our spouse, our children. So home is number one, locational, structural. At the same time, it is relational. But then I have never seen anybody fully content with whatever home he or she lives in. There is always room for, or expectation for, or aspiration of improving it further. So there is also the third dimension, aspirational. This conceptualization of home, to come up with this conceptualization, I drew insights from beyond sociology, in anthropology, in political human geography, and of course sociology, and also to some extent cooperative literature, focusing on diaspora communities. So I recognized that home is essential for any individual to feel as well as reflect on one's own identity, which is intimately connected as well as embedded within gradually larger structures, starting from home, family, in the home, then extended kin network, then neighborhood, then nation state, and so on and so forth. So identity is drawn from home. Right. How I get to there is also an interesting story. So whenever I meet somebody, we would exchange our names, right? Oh, I'm Hassan, or I'm Mahmud. The other person will say so. And I'm from. If the very second question is where are we from? I mean, origin country. Of course, we are Bangladeshis, but within Bangladesh, where? And then we would gradually keep on asking question, more and more question, to specify as much as possible about where this person is coming from. Basically, we disentangle layers after layers after layers to get at a satisfactory level to fully understand or adequately understand the person's identity as well as establish the kind of relationship, right? So your question was like how am I going to understand at a theoretical level belonging, right? So as I said, belonging is something that is present in everyone's head. Where I belong, where I want to belong, whether I am content with where I find myself. All these are fundamental questions that I believe every individual entertains, regardless of whether they are educated or not, whether they are professional academics or not. Right. So since this is so common, this is so, almost natural of human beings, there needs to be some kind of like theoretical framework to understand it, and in a way that would be generalizable to, various populations. So on that account, I hoped that the theoretical framework I outlined in my book was generalizable. And to have that kind of big confidence in that, I looked at Bangladeshis in Tokyo, quite different context. And I was able to understand their perspective of home by looking at their remittance practices, both among Bangladeshis in Los Angeles and Bangladeshis in Japan. As Amanda mentioned, in Japan, these Bangladeshis would always, at certain points, tell me or reward me that Japan is not a country to permanently settle. It is forever for it. For those who were, by the way, Japan doesn't have any formal migration, policies. So initially, when Japan became structurally dependent on migrant labor after the economic boom in 80s, Japan opened some policies that scholars would later called backdoor policies, meaning that the government did not offer any formal migration uh, programs like the ones we see in European countries or America, right? But it needed migrant labor. So what it offered port entry visa policy for certain nationalities. It started with Iran, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Port entry. And people, like in thousands, people from these countries would go to Japan, like on paper as visitors. But the moment they would enter across the immigration, they would just disappear into the growing factory towns in Japan. And government knew it, local police knew it, business owners knew it, everyone knew it, and everyone would turn a blind eye. That's why scholars used to call this backdoor policy. thousands of migrants were entering into Japan through back door because there was no front door open. Then, because of nativistic backlash after a couple of years, on one hand, on the other hand, the invention or discovery of uh, Nikkei, meaning that third or fourth generation of Japanese descendants in Latin American countries. Many Japanese from Japan, they migrated out of Japan into South Asian countries sheerly for survival. So they have their third and fourth generation back there. Japan started recruiting them by packaging them to the public as, oh, they are our kings. They should come. We should welcome them. So that was a pool of migrant workers. That was going on, but side by side, the migration from South Asia and Southeast Asia also continued, but through another semi-legal form, which was language student, because language students were allowed to enter Japan and were also allowed to work officially up to 28 hours a week. But these language students would go there, or migrants, aspiring migrants would enter Japan with language student visa, which would allow them to work up to 28 hours a week. I found everyone working more than 80 hours. Average in my interviews was well over 80 hours a week. So they were basically de facto migrants. Migration scholars call this kind of migration to Japan side door. The door is open, but not really the front side. Way to enter is legal, but the way they lived their life was not really legal. So it was like it lived. So, but these two kinds of people, separate permanently in Japan was impossible, out of question, because they would be required to leave Japan after the stipulated time if they were with proper legal status. But many of them actually exceeded. Many of them violated those legal provisions. So they lived in a quasi or kind of like a gray area created through actual practice. You know, for them, Japan is definitely not that country to settle. By law, there is a tiny portion, tiny number of migrants these days, which started in 2012, just when I started looking at my paper. I actually have some of my very close friends who became naturalized Japanese at that time. And their experience is also not so good. They just have visa benefit for having a Japanese passport, like easy access to different countries. That's it. And they are allowed to purchase real estate and property in some areas which are restricted for Japanese citizens. But in social life, they are skipped. Like, no, at the most. So for them, since they are usually high educated and experienced and have some like healthy descendants, they easily qualify through the foreign-based education system in, say, Australia, UK, Canada, and many other countries. So for them, if Japan is not the permanent destination, Bangladesh is either. Because like, or obviously. So they use Japan as a stepping stone, which the ultimately Paulo called stepwise migration, or the higher state and a bigger. So in that way, Japan is always a place not to be home. So these migrants would save as much as possible and set that money out of Japan. And you know, by definition, remittance is the money that moves across national border. If it moves within the border, it is not remittance actually in the official calculation. It has to cross the border. So that's why sending remittance is always high among Bangladeshis in Japan compared to Bangladeshis in America. Now, if we take this observation at a theoretical level that, well, if migrants cannot settle permanently at established hope in their destination, remittance and remittance to their origin country or wherever they see themselves like permanently settling. In that case, there should not be any remittance coming out from United States, as you pointed. Yeah, because by the time most of the Bangladeshis, I would say like more than 90% of them enter US through legal channels. And the kind I was conducting my interview, almost 80% of them were entering US to develop ID. Bangladesh, Bangladesh met you in that spin in 2000, I think 11 of well. Like by then, the threshold of Bangladeshis immigrating US exceeded the allowable living within the lottery visa, which is I think 50,000 a year and 50,000 in 3 consecutive years. So, which means every 3 years, more than 50,000 Bangladeshis have been migrating since 2010 or the immediate number. Right. But the thing is, whenever they enter America, they already are permanent residents. They are legally recognized, as well as particularly for working class white immigrants, there are number of federal supports, local state supports, and community support for them to get settled, to acculturate by improving their English, to learn, different trades and skills to enter into semi-professional or sometimes even professional careers, right? So it's well and good, right? But the actual experience is quite nuanced, complex. Because most of these migrants who enter US to develop the visa, for example, I edited a volume in which Misbah had a chapter about converting credentials, non-American credentials into American job market. It doesn't really happen. So even though they are highly educated and experienced back in Bangladesh, once they enter America, everything is lost. So they have to start from the ground. I interviewed actually 6 PhD doctors. 6. Only 2 of them were able to graduate themselves into semi-professional career as lab assistant for flower teams, or still were earning. Not I would know them since 2018, but until 2018, I knew they were working as sales clerks. Why? Because their credential did not help them to enter into medical profession in America. It's PRC completely. They failed to, get admission into a recognized medical school to do residency, which is required for them to get a license to be able to practice. So, there are other structural barriers also. So these migrants could most likely, almost everybody will start from the ground. However, as Bejo and Alejandro Portes recognize it, they are segmented as major POV. These migrants stay in working class in America, right? But they enter America with immense amount or considerable amount of cultural capital as well as social capital. That actually help them to survive as well as help them to send their kids to better schools, which could prepare them to find middle-class jobs, unlike compared to migrants, for example, from Latin America. Because of proximity and because of certain geopolitical factors, migrants from Latin America are predominantly working class from working class background. So they lack relatively in cultural and social capital compared to Asia, South Asia migrants. That's what makes most of the difference, especially for the second generation from these two stars of migrant population. Right. So, in a nutshell, what I observed that working class people they would exert themselves to just get settled. I a better reading. Of course, they will consistently engage in transnational comparison by saying, "Oh yeah, Maliko is 150 years old. That's okay. Still, it is good." Because the neighborhood doesn't have the kind of like crowded
crowded, noisy, dust and other pollution ridden neighborhood like even the most expensive neighborhood in Akasi, right? So they would always engage in kind of comparison, cross-border comparison to kind of like find some sort of, gratification and satisfaction that whatever they had been through is better than what they let back in Bangladesh. However, they could not be enough for most of the time because they would always, on daily basis, they would know that they working like really working class jobs. So to compensate that status loss, most of them would try really hard to save 100, 200, or even $300 every month. And they would spend that little saving in paying installment to purchase an apartment or a real estate or a piece of agricultural land back in Bangladesh. Because being a renter, being a landlord gives both a little bit of financial return but a lot of social return as landlord. So there is one way for them to compensate. So even though they may not have their family in Bangladesh, which is mostly true, they don't have their family because of the family unification policy. They bring all of their family, including their siblings' family, to America. I found respondents telling me that one person would sponsor immigration of as many as 39 family members. So this is how it is practiced among Bangladeshis. So even though they don't have family in Bangladesh to take care of and send money as remittances, they will send money to invest because they lack in social status or they lost some of their social status upon migration. To make some of that, they would send money and invest in Bangladesh. Although financially that may not make proper sense. For middle class, the story is a little bit different because there are a lot of these days I think about 10 to 12,000 Bangladeshis enter America every year for higher education. So they're already in higher education, and in most cases, they graduate and they enter into professional career. So for them, the struggle is a little bit difficult. They have the relatively better life. They enter into professional career. They eventually end up purchasing a home in a better neighborhood or send their kids to schools. Life goes very, happy, fun, a lot of fun. But towards the end of their career, their children grow up with American values and practices. They grow up, they get jobs, they find their spouses. Of course, in most cases, they seek permission from their or approval from their parents. They get married, they move away. The family starts dissipating. By the time also the person reaches retirement, professional networks are also cut off. So at certain point, because I interview all I will explain it why. He realizes that he's alone. The home he or he established in America is no more. That's the point when he started thinking about finding or going back to his roots, which is practically not there anymore because the siblings are already also in America. The childhood friends have settled many different places. They are no more in the village. But still, these persons, in their nostalgia, in their in their mind, they crave for some kind of social connection. That's where they start visiting their ancestral villages or hospitals, and to re-establish or to reconnect their link with those places, they start donating its charitable causes. So I saw that most working class people, migrants, did not really spend on charitable houses. And most professional and richer side of immigrants, they were the ones who were mostly active in charitable remittances. So even the money, the kind of money they send to Bangladesh are defined different. So now, based on these different kinds of lifestyle with different types of remittance, well, in reality, these are money, but these monies have different meanings, drawing from, you know, Ilya Zelizer's idea of relational work. I kind of like try to understand what kind of meanings migrants attach to the money they send home. Right. That's where I started realizing that the money is flowing is very different kind of money than money in general. So it is important, or it is very, very, very necessary for us to understand, to come up with a different theoretical framework, analytical framework to understand what this remittance actually is and how to, you know, answer some of the questions related to it from either academic point of view or political. I guess.
Thank you so much, Hassan. That was a very rich overview of the work, which my Amanda, I strongly recommend to all of you. I really enjoyed reading it. And it's also a book that's structured in such a way that it flows extremely easily and keeps you gripped through it. I liked how you book flow. You bundle the two cases in sort of the separate chapters and then draw it everything together later. I think one of the things that's important to consider is that so much of the work on remittances that's out there, and there's a huge body of work on remittances that migrants send, tends to, of course, continuously focus on the financial aspects of it and on what happens to remittances and how they're used, particularly in countries in the global south and developing world, and much less attention goes into why migrants accept it, like what the emotional work that goes into that. And so much of what's in this book, I have also felt in the context of Asian migrant to the culture as well. It's much more than about just the financial, it's the emotional. I'd add that's a quick question, which is that something that again is completely understudied is the phenomena of reverse migration, which is that migrants are always seen as the source of the money that goes back home. And the assumption is that migrants, once they reach a destination, be it one that affords permanent settlement and citizenship like the US, or one that affords temporary opportunity like the Gulf or Japan, and migrants are always the ones who are earning something. But the fact is, a migrant's life trajectory in a receiving state is never steady and stable, and there are periods of migrant crisis. They may be facing a lack of wages, they may be facing the loss of the job contract. And yet, so I'm basing this on my anecdotal evidence from interviews here and in other parts of the Gulf, which return migrants of Asia, which is how they frequently then rely on remittances and money sent from home to help them override that crisis and get them through a difficult phase until they're back at your position with their earnings. And I've always thought that's something that nobody talks about. I think there's a shame factor it sometimes too for migrants. It's not something one generally asks about this one, that idea. So there's a lot of emotional labor that happens on both sides. So I was wondering if that's something that you came across in Bangladesh.
Yeah, of course. That's a really great observation, and I totally agree with you that this aspect of evidence and migration in general is very lacking and particularly attention from adaptive studies. Regarding policymakers about migration and migration remittances, I have a big comment that this idea of remittance in Korea is just made up. It's not real. Whether we migrate or not, once we grow up, once we get into earning professions,
we would always try to financially help our parents, our dependent siblings, our relatives and friends in need of financial help, right? Don't we? Because this is in our culture. This is like in our culture that tells us, in our reason that tells us or instructs us to, help those in need. And there is a priority order of the potential receivers, right? Same thing happens with migration because people migrate for a better income opportunity, they start earning better, and so it is normal that they would send money to who? Again, we see the priority order. Parents, spouse, children, siblings, other relatives, neighbors, people they know. What is the country from which they come from, right? They do not send money to anywhere. They do not send money to any person. They do not send money to any neighborhood. These are all very specific because for remittance to occur, there has to be extremely emotionally close, emotionally very close relationship, long-term relationship, enduring relationship has to be there between the migrant and the recipient. Otherwise, there will be no remittance transaction, period. It is not just like any other standard economic activity where I need something, I have money, I'm just going to the store and give that money storekeeper and get whatever I need and that's it. No, it doesn't work like that. So it is of course a financial process, economic transaction. One, it is a very special kind of economic transaction that is founded on social and cultural relations, not like arm's length relations. That's where is my entry point into the entire story. So remittance is a special kind of economic transaction. Now, your quick question was about reverse remittance. I go to Bangladeshi neighborhood in Doha quite frequently, and I know that hundreds of Bangladeshi migrant workers in Doha are not having income opportunity these days. Many of them has to bring money from up. So money is coming to Qatar from Bangladesh, which may be called reverse remittance. What does it tell us? In the literature, remittance is defined as development funding. What kind of development is this? When remittance is coming from Bangladesh to Qatar, it is one of the richest countries in the world, whereas Bangladesh is a poor country. Should we accept this proposition that poor countries send development funding to rich countries? So this idea of remittance as development fund doesn't really happen. This is not all. Theoretically also, in my book, I actually enter through theoretical limitations. So in this book, I did not start with any theory. I started with stories because I wanted to know what is remittance from migrants' point of view. Because they are the ones who are thinking about remittance, sending remittance, and experiencing the consequences of the act of remittance, right? So in literature, remittance is studied primarily from a UB economics of labor migration perspective. This is one of the theoretical approach in development economics developed in mid-80s. Lucas and Stark, I believe, one of them used to be here for some time. Stark, right? So they assume that migration is an economic undertaking like any other economic action by rationally motivated individuals, right? And for them, there are two possible motivations to send remittances. One, they define altruism when they see that the migrant sending money to their family and relatives in the origin country without expecting any economic gain for themselves, for the migrants. So they are sacrificing their economic interests. So it is altruism. And if the scholars recognize that the migrants sending remittance in return, they get or expect to get some financial or economic benefit. For example, a greater share from their inheritance, or purchasing resources and assets and maintaining those, or creating profitable networks you can call waska, which might in future benefit them economically. Right. So according to this framework, sending money to mother comes easy, right? We don't expect any economic return by sending money to mother. Let me give you an actual act of sending money to the mother. It is from a mind map I met in Los Angeles. He told me, my mother has asked for 400, this is in the phase 1. Who was the handbooks? Kidding. Thank you so much. So he told me that my mother asked me for $400 in addition to what I regularly send her every month. He regularly sends money to her, to his mother every month, whatever amount it is. But in one particular month, his mother asked him for additional $400. Why? She wants to buy a gold necklace as a wedding present for my sister's daughter. This is because she gave an expensive wedding gift to my elder brother's daughter a few months ago. I don't like this. I think I don't have the same kind of responsibility as an uncle for my sister's daughter as I had for my brother's daughter. He was referring to patriarchal and patriarchal family customs that create differentiated gender expectation. He continued, but my mother wants to be equally generous to both of her granddaughters. This is putting an extra burden on me. He ended up sending $400 in addition in remittances. He did not get any economic benefit out of that. So according to that definition, it is altruistic. But to be altruistic, it has to be voluntary. It is not. He did not send it willingly. His mother asked him. He also further tells us that he doesn't think that he is equally responsible to both of her nieces. He feels more responsibility towards the daughter of his brother than towards the daughter of his sister. Right? And he also tells, I don't like it. He doesn't like it. He actually told me a lot more things. But according to academic definition, this is altruism, which is not. Because it is not happening between two disinterested persons. It is happening in a very infrequent, emotionally related, socially close relationships between someone who is giving and someone who is supposed to be receiving. Right? Without understanding this background, relations as well as the specific social and cultural norms, values, customs, expectations, and all these nuances, it is really misleading to claim that ISS to destabilize. In another case, if someone sends money to, for example, purchase a real estate or maintain a real estate, it would increase in value, economic value. So it would become self-interest, right? I have another anecdote from somebody in Japan. He's told me, I send more than half of my uncle's salary to my father in Bangladesh every month. Besides, I borrowed a large sum of money to reconstruct our old house. As the only son, I inherit it and will need to renovate it someday. I'm sending money to my father to refurbish it now, so that he and my mother can live in comfort and feel happy about having the modern house. Of course, there are elements of self-interest. But what about magic parrots happy? That's not self-interest. So this is how I kind of like demonstrate that the existing academic understanding of migrant remittance is at least inadequate.
So much, Hasan. That's wonderful. I could listen to you talk about this book for ages, but I really do want to give an opportunity to the audience also to perhaps ask a few questions. And so maybe if any of you are interested, have a question from Hasan, Dr. Mahmoud, you could put up your hand and we have mics around.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. The question is, considering currently happening anti-migration trend in the world, how would you, let's say, evaluate or expect future in this context?
I couldn't get the last part.
So what would be your vision towards the future in this specific context, considering anti-migration trend happening?
So it's about migration trend, right? Migration has been there since, I would say, human beings started living in society. Because nowhere we are very satisfied fully. No home is kind of like fully make us, satisfied. That's why we always keep on thinking about trying to improve whatever we have wherever possible, in what ways, right? So, given this in the background, migration is likely to continue. And I guess what you meant by contemporary situation in the world, where we see increasingly more and more states are entering into war. War means dismantlement of destruction of regular life, means destruction of home, means added necessity to find a power. For if they don't, then better power. So migration is likely to increase. On the other hand, there is also something else which is happening now than compared to say 300 years ago. Now we had something called nation state, right? Even in 1970s, there wasn't passport. I mean, some countries had passport. Other countries had some kind of like handouts or some kind of like loosely organized written papers as, necessary papers to move across borders. The the passport regime is increasingly becoming consolidated and stronger to the point that it becomes almost impossible for human beings to travel any single space on earth without facing the nation state as the sovereign guard across national borders. So, in reality, on one hand, we see increasing incentive and encouragement or feeling of necessity to migrate, move down from places for war, one reason, for climate change another reason, for loss of livelihood for various reasons, another reason. There are multiple reasons. So the reasons are increasing for people to move across places, in one hand. On the other hand, all the places have already been encapsulated in nation state, which does not allow people to move in and out. Nation states try its best to keep migrants in and keep non-migrants away. I think the professor from Stratford, who frequently visit here, he has some ideas about nation state as primary focusing on population control rather than territorial, because it is actually population control in essence rather than territory control, which is what nation state is mostly interested. So I guess I have answered really elaborately to your very specific question.
hygiene, basic things to go on. Think of how, like we see, like the level start to have community scope on from the course in your intern. I was really curious. Do you think in the future or in 20 years, we can associate migration policy because they might not want a migrant, but they will welcome either is unable to stay in that country. So do you think can we shake immigration policies? But general they might as in some situation happening, it for countries in one to diversify their family rights without see that migrants that they are in a country to survey in that country and not from the country and you think that theory seeking are very some policy.
Uh, that's a very good question and really difficult person. So, if you mean migration policy in origin countries, which would be easy to answer, yes, a state does have migration policies that encourage and facilitate more and more remittances. I can immediately think of a study that was done in Philippines by Rodriguez, which came out in 2009. The title of her book was Migrants for Exports. So she looked at how the state of Philippines developed an elaborate institutional and bureaucratic system in the country and also in its foreign missions, which would facilitate employment abroad for EPs, the northern Filipinos, right? In expectation that these people could go abroad alone, not with them. Because if they migrate with Henry, very few. Because remittance is basically per capita. The United Nations actually celebrates, I think, June 6th every year as a Remittance Day. Because migrants send remittance primarily for the family and its maintenance. Only a smaller portion of remittance money is actually used in what experts call development, right? Since most of the remittance money is not used in the development, experts always complain that migrants waste their money. Migrants do not know how to use remittance for development. This is development funding. How is that? Migrants don't even call their money remittance. A couple of weeks ago, I reviewed an article for Current Sociology Journal in which the author is making this play that why you call this money remittance? Isn't migrants' money? We have no right to define that money other than taking how they define. Migrants don't define the remittance. Remittance does not, the term does not exist in their vocabulary. So, for origin country, the country actively encourages migrants to go abroad and send into the Philippines, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, China, you name me. Okay? But for the receiving country, remittance has not yet entered into their considerations about when they think about migration policy.
Yeah, I want to share a point with you that I was seeing the blog touching the media. That and I'm not gonna name but the people, but they realize the influx of money but that person is earning in their country, but they send it out. They're like, I think you, yeah, I know, man.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and then they're saying that, oh, they're lots on yeah, but tamil out. So they should encourage the family to the politicians to limit the money that is in behalf without a deeply understanding they're not setting the money up. I take to know what the fuck they're
Yeah, I do know because it was one of the core areas in my coursework explanation sequence that you said, and I actually had a publication on this. In one of my articles, which I had really hard time theorizing about it because there isn't enough theoretical engagement about how a destination state
affect migrants' remittance, because actually destination states has so far not given enough or thoughts at all in remittance. What you saw and what you are referring to, I also this is a few newspaper reports in Malaysia, which focus on kind of like xenophobic the ideas about if people are working in our countries and they are sending money, they are not spending it in our country, they are sending money to their country, which is kind of, negatively impacting our economy. That is really, I mean, that stays only in like nativistic political rhetoric. When it comes to policy making, which is not actually based directly on public opinion, which is the act of politicians, bureaucrats, business organizations, and organized interests. At this point, one of the book that comes into my mind, which is the title is um, I forgot, but it's the name of the author is Daniel Krishner, and the book came out in 2004, I believe, 4 or 5, where he theorized about how U.S. migration policy or immigration policy is formulated. It applies core defining factors: the bureaucrats, labor union, organized agro industry, and what? And I think the ideological, political ideologies, they all come together. They find collaborations, often strange collaborations, in time of debating over migration, immigration policies. So, at that level, where immigration policies are actually formulated, debated, contested, reformed, remittance has not yet entered as a substantive, issue.
I would just add one thing to that, though, a slightly different direction. I mean, the US has just passed through the big, beautiful bill. They are going to be opposing a remittance tax to go January next year. It is low. It sounds low, it's 1%, but it is highly unusual. So countries are taking innovative ways of dealing with this. One last question I was going to take from the audience, Hasan, that didn't get borne out our reception, unless you had a pinpoint.
I'd make a quick point is that the state also realizes that it doesn't have full control over what migrants do with their money, because they always find innovative ways of circumventing official channels. For example, I can make a phone call which would facilitate transfer of certain amounts of money without going to bank channel. We call would be.
And the joint is taxation actually never work. It just washes it in formality. One last question for Dr. Nahul, if you have any.
I don't know. Others? Yes, sure.
I don't know if it will resonate with others, but I'm just curious. The social years composes to more individuals, and you have remittance as the belonging. I'm curious about psychology of people, because when they lose their parents and there are no other significant ones in Bangladesh, or they bring their parents to Los Angeles, let's say, not Japan, do you think that they lose that connection as belonging because they start building their life in Los Angeles, and when they asked where you're from, they start saying, I'm from the United States, because there are no emotional connections to the United States?
That's an interesting and very important question. My expectation was that the connections would dissipate to the point that there would be no remittance at all. So for my comments in Los Angeles, I saw that initial years of their immigration, they would send large sums of money more frequently, consistently, almost like every month, because they would have their parents already in Bangladesh. They would have possibly dependent siblings and other relatives to take care of, right? But as I said, US had family unification policies. So between 5 to 10 years, all these immediate family members, or most of them, majority of them, would join the migrants in the US. So which would take away the necessity for sending money for their livelihood, right? So at that point, remittance would really drop drastically. That's why I find it like starting
starting here and quickly, decline up to here, right? But then, as I kind of like hinted to at the beginning, that these people, even when they think that they settle in the US permanently, they find structural barriers towards their upward mobility, towards moving up from their working class positions. That's where they again start sending remittance, but not for family maintenance, but for investment. And for the professionals, they send remittance again not for the investment, but to reconnect, of course, with different levels of success and failure. So remittance are said not necessary for one specific reason. There are varieties of reasons which appear as necessary at certain points in their life course, in their migration, right? So in that way, now why it happens? One of the reasons that I haven't theorized enough, but I think it can be hinted, or this idea can come out from here, is that nation state is actually inherited basis. If someone is not part of the normative mainstream, those individuals always are rather singled out and often discriminated. That is one factor, one possible factor that would stop them from realizing the feeling of conflict. So this is one of the reasons that I think, that I argue, at least for my case, that people who have visibly achieved their American dream still record that America is not their home reality. So that's what encourages them to start looking back to their roots. So as long as nation state does not embrace all immigrants equally, give them total comfort, feeling of comfort that this is their own, the partial or total lack of the feeling of own in the new destination country would likely to encourage them to send privileges, look back where they will possibly send it.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and thank you for the thoughtful questions and engagements. On the Apple Center, thank you, Professor Hasan, for sharing your insights on remittance as belonging, and Professor Garrett and Zahra Babar for also joining the conversation and offering your valuable perspectives. I would invite everyone for those session outside and join in this amazing conversation. Thank you.